There are many well-known figures through history. Napoleon, Cleopatra, Alexander the Great, and another one of the figures that you might recognize is probably Genghis Khan. But none of those are who I'm going to be talking about in this video. Although I am going to be talking about a Khan, but in this case it's Kublai Khan, who is Genghis Khan's grandson, one of many, many grandsons, may I add. Anyway, none of that actually matters. Let's talk about Kublai. But before we talk about Kublai, let's go back and talk about Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan founded the Mongol Empire in 1206. I don't know why I do this. Let's just not, I don't know where do you put your hands? I don't know. What do I do with my hands? Do I move them around a lot? I don't know. It's weird. No, nothing I do feels natural. Genghis Khan founded the Mongol Empire in 1206, and it became the largest contiguous empire in history just ever, which is quite large. But unfortunately for Genghis, he couldn't live forever. And when he died in 1227, there was a lot of tension as to who would be the next ruler of the Mongol Empire. These tensions continued for decades and even resulted in a civil war. But eventually, the Mongol Empire was split into 4 different territories. I am most likely going to butcher a lot of these names, so just bear with me, but they will be on the screen so you can read for yourself however you want to pronounce them. The Golden Hordes, Il Khahanate, the Sughatai Khahanate, and the Yuan Dynasty. But now that's all out the way, we can finally talk about Kublai Khan. He was the leader of the Yuan Dynasty and achieved many great things during his reign between 1260 and 1294 when he eventually died. Kublai wanted to continue his grandfather's mission in uniting the entire world under a single rule. I don't know why he doesn't just expand that, and why not go for the entire moons and stars and other planets that you can see throughout the universe. I mean, come on Kublai, if we're going to be unrealistic in our goals, let's be unrealistic beyond imagination. So the next step was to conquer land overseas. He was smart enough not to just go in all guns blazing though. He began with a diplomatic approach, sending a letter in 1268 to the Kamakura shogunate expressing that he wanted Japan to pay tribute to the Mongol Empire. However, he also subtly included a little threat of warfare, because that is how you convince people. Kublai Khan backed this up in 1270 by sending an ambassador over to Japan in order to establish diplomatic relations between the two nations. But anyway, Japan just completely ignored these 2 attempts at Kublai reaching out.
Speak to the ant, cause the face, it ain't listening.
The regent shogun of Japan was confident in their ability to fend off a potential invasion or attack from the Mongol Empire. So Japan had successfully delivered the silent treatment, all the way up to 1274 when Kublai Khan had just had enough and decided to send between 16 and 40,000 warriors of various different nations that he had conquered to invade Japan. The Mongols started off by plundering the Tsushima and Ikai Islands before heading to mainland Japan and landing on Hakata Bay. The Mongols vastly outnumbered Japanese warriors and so won the opening engagements between the 2 armies. But the numbers advantage wasn't the only advantage that the Mongol Empire had over Japan. They had superior battle tactics, superior weaponry, and just more versatile use of their weaponry like shields, etc. The main takeaway is that the Mongol Empire should just easily be able to wipe out Japan. I mean, you don't become the largest contiguous empire in history just by being able to cut a few people after flinging a sword around. Following these opening engagements, the Mongol army remained on Hakata Bay for the next 18 days. The reason behind this is kind of unknown, but unfortunately for the Mongol Empire, this was a detrimental mistake. Now that is a perfect time to introduce a music change for the next part. Something dangerous was looming over the horizon. On the 20th of November 1274, a typhoon crashed into the shores of Japan and completely wiped out about 1/3 of the Mongol Empire's army, forcing them to retreat.
Yes, very sad. Anyway, it got me thinking.
After this huge, epic fail, Kublai Khan returned to his diplomatic approach by sending letters and ambassadors over the next 7 years. However, he soon learned that Japan have clearly got an A star in the silent treatment, as they continued to ignore his messages. And not only that, Japan had decided that they had had enough, and so executed any ambassadors that the Mongol Empire sent over. I mean, no one likes being ignored at all, like, let's be honest, it's a not nice feeling when you're ignored. And Kublai Khan was no different. He did not like this. And so in 1281, he sent 100,000 men across sort of 4,000 different ships to invade Japan once again. And as Kublai Khan was known as the Wise Khan, then he clearly must have changed his battle tactics a little bit, considering how poorly the first invasion attempt went. And so with that in mind, he did the exact same thing and decided to launch an invasion from Tsushima and Ikai Islands onto Hakata Bay. However, he did switch it up a tiny bit by sending another group of warriors to a different area of Japan. However, they were just quickly thwarted and essentially just null and void, really. So, Hakata Bay it was. It was round 2, and the Japanese soldiers and samurai showed incredible heroism and courage by fending off the Mongol Empire, ensuring that most of the battle actually just happened aboard ships, instead of letting the Mongol army even set foot on the Hakata Bay. Kublai's army was being completely embarrassed, and they were pushed back not once, but twice, all the way back to where they started on Ikai Island. Japan continued overloading and harassing the Mongol fleet of ships by sending raid after raid on their small ships, forcing the Mongols to tie their ships together as a sort of a defense tactic against these raids. However, that might be the most fatal mistake they have made yet. Kublai Khan did send reinforcements to support his army. However, this had very little effect. Yes, they pushed forward a little bit, but eventually they were thwarted, they were stuck, they weren't moving anywhere. Oh, do you hear that? Is that the sound of the music changing once again? On the 14th of August, 1281, a wind that was becoming all too familiar to the Mongol army began swooping in, and all of a sudden, crash, bash, smash, and all the other comic book effects happened all at once. A typhoon once again laid waste to the Mongol army and destroyed half to 2/3 of their fleet. Kublai's army had no choice but to retreat, and those who washed up on the shores of Japanese lands were swiftly executed. The saving grace once again was Mother Nature herself, and this typhoon that swooped in became known as the Divine Winds, or kamikaze, which is a word I'm sure most people would recognise, because in World War II this phrase resurfaced for when the
it's been a witness.
Japanese pilots would fill their planes with explosives and fly them into enemy warcraft as a last-ditch defense tactic. Following one of the most embarrassing defeats possibly in history, Kublai Khan actually had a quite impressive and achievement-filled career as a leader. He managed to establish peace across Asia and Eastern Europe, known as the Pax Mongolica, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, which lasted way beyond when he died until the mid-14th century. However, over time it was found that the Mongol ships used during these battles were actually really poorly crafted. The Chinese during this time were renowned for their shipbuilding, and so why was the Mongol ships so easily destroyed? Was Kublai too hasty on his invasion, maybe too overconfident that he could beat Japan so easily, or was he just a big dummy? Meanwhile, in Japan, religion began to soar in popularity as the kamikaze was believed to have been sent by the Shinto god of war as a response to the prayers of the Shinto priests and Buddhist monks. Japan prepared for a potential third invasion for the next 30 years, which took a big strain on both their agriculture, economy and political landscape. And people were not too happy about this, and so over time caused a rebellion. and as a result, the Kamakura shogunate fell in 1333. It really isn't common for an army to be embarrassed so badly, but Kublai Khan wasn't embarrassed once, he was embarrassed twice over 7 years. Imagine he had a very successful career as a Mongol leader. However, he's going to be remembered for the biggest fail I have ever seen in an attempt to conquer another person's land. On the other hand, many of the legendary samurai stories originated from these invasion attempts, as the heroism and courage of being able to fend off an enemy that vastly outnumbered you shows just how impressive the samurai warriors really were. And there's only one thing I have to say to that: GG Japan.